absolutely need to speak into the mics that are on your tables. And to do that, you'll need to push the button to turn the red light green, and then ask your question, and then push your button again so that the mic goes quiet, so that people online can hear Hope's response and hear your questions. We are here tonight. We have Tamara Burns from the county. She's provided pizza for all of us. So thank you, Tamara. And we're excited to hear from you, Hope. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask, do y'all need me to share my screen for the presentation, or do you guys have it up in the... Yeah, okay, great. Let's see. Do I have screen sharing abilities?
Yes, you should. And that way you can be in charge of your slides as well.
I think I got it. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, lovely. So I'm happy to get started if everyone's ready.
Yes.
Sounds like yes. Okay, great. Well, hi again. I'm Hope. I'm one of the benefits planners with DVR. And I have some information to share with you about some Social Security benefit programs. So one program we'll focus on today is called SSI. You all might be somewhat familiar with SSI, but I wanted to make sure and just hit some of the highlights. Please let me know as we go if there's questions, but I will try to have some time at the end for questions as well. So yeah, let me go ahead and just jump right in. So with benefits planning with DVR, we do talk about a lot of different benefit programs, but a lot of times we will meet with students or folks who have recently graduated who have a benefit called SSI. So let's go ahead and talk about that specifically. So SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. And this is a benefit that a person could get based on disability and financial need. It's not necessarily related in any way to their work history or anyone else's work history, thank goodness. And frequently, when we are meeting with folks who have the SSI benefit program, well, first of all, it's also another name for it is called the Title 16 program. And oftentimes we will meet with folks who are either a child with a disability, that would be someone under age 18. People can get the SSI benefit when they are under age 18. And then we can also meet with folks who are in the disabled student or student with a disability category, and that's up to age 22, and they might be eligible for the SSI program. But most often we meet with people who are over age 18 and are eligible for the SSI benefit as an adult. Sometimes we will meet with folks who had the SSI benefit when they were under age 18, and then Social Security contacts them and says, hey, we're going to do the age 18 redetermination for SSI eligibility. And the criteria are very different for being a child who's eligible for SSI versus an adult who's eligible for SSI. And unfortunately, I'm not able to go into the distinctions too much today, but it is important to know that the criteria for eligibility is very different. So you want to keep that in mind. Okay. One way that we are able to understand someone's circumstances with their Social Security benefits is by receiving a document called a Benefits Planning Query, or a BPQY, from Social Security. And this is an example of a BPQY that we've received. Ordinarily, there's name and social on it, but we've removed that here. This is an example of what we will see when someone has the SSI benefit. And this year, the highest possible amount that someone could get when they're on the SSI program is shown here. It's $967. So this person is eligible for the SSI program, and they became eligible in the last couple of years, and they're getting the full, what we call, federal benefit rate. Oh, I heard a sound. Does someone have a question?
No.
No?
Nope.
Okay, great. I just didn't want to talk over anyone. So this is the first page of the BPQI document that we get from Social Security. There's other pages that come with, but this is just an example of what we see for SSI benefits. A little bit of information about the SSI program. It is a program, like I said, not necessarily connected to anyone's work history. It's for people who are over a certain age, who have blindness as part of their disability, or who are considered disabled. They have a documented disability, again, including children under age 18. And it's very different than other Social Security benefits, because other Social Security benefits are based on someone's work history, but SSI is unique in that way, where you don't have to have a work history, or your parents don't have to have a work history. You just have to have a disability and the financial need for it. So it's what we call a needs-based or income-based program. And it is available specifically to help people cover their basic living costs, like rent and potentially like food and basically food and shelter costs. So like I mentioned before, the maximum amount of SSI money or cash benefit that someone could get each month this year in 2025 is $967. The other word that I use for that, or term, is called the federal benefit rate. And the federal benefit rate does change. It usually goes up a little every year. And for an individual, it's at $967. Sometimes we run into situations where two people are a couple and each of them are eligible for an SSI benefit, but because they're a couple and specifically they're either married or they're living together sharing expenses, Social Security will actually combine their benefit to an SSI couple's benefit. And that's not always ideal, because what happens is they don't get twice as much benefit. They don't each get their $967. They get a combined amount that's significantly lower, and they only get $1,450 combined. So that's something to be aware of. Also, with SSI eligibility, people in the state of Washington, at least, automatically get Medicaid. Not every state does that automatically. Some states require you, once you're eligible for SSI, to separately apply for Medicaid, and then you're approved because you're eligible for SSI. But thankfully, here in Washington, if someone is eligible for SSI, they automatically get that Medicaid health coverage. Sometimes people call it Apple Health. That's another name for it. And the other thing that they should be getting automatically is basic food. And depending on like age and circumstances, that could be under the food stamps program or something called Wash Cap. So there's two different food programs. They both use the EBT card, but they're out of different pools of money, and their rules for eligibility or keeping the benefit are different as well. So there's food stamps, and then there's a Wash Cap benefit. And the Wash Cap benefit is specifically connected to the SSI benefit. You don't have to have SSI or Social Security benefits to get food stamps, but you do have to have SSI to get wash cap. Okay. SSI has a resource limit attached to eligibility. So earlier I mentioned that SSI is an income-based or income-tested program or needs-based program. And that means that depending on, there's two financial factors that they take into account, that they think about when they are looking at SSI eligibility. And one of them, of course, is monthly income, but the other is resources. So someone has to have low resources to qualify financially for the SSI benefit. And specifically, their resources have to be below $2,000. For an SSI couple, it's actually $3,000 because it's a combined amount. But for an individual, a single person, household of one, the limit is $2,000. Excuse me. A few examples of things that Social Security considers resources that they will count. Money in your checking account, obviously. Money in your savings account, that one. But some other things, they will ignore one vehicle or one car. But if there's a second vehicle or second car, that will be counted as a resource. Same thing with owning a home. So someone on SSI actually could own their own home. That happens sometimes where they inherit a house and they're living in it, and it doesn't count as a resource because Social Security knows they have to have some place to live. But if they lived in an apartment and they owned a home, that would be considered a resource. But also retirement accounts, or like stocks and bonds, or money that's being invested, that kind of thing. That's absolutely going to be counted against that $2,000 resource limit. And one that's come up recently, cryptocurrencies, that too counts as part of being part of the resources that Social Security counts. Another one to keep in mind is land. And again, if someone owns a house on a certain amount of land, you really want to talk to Social Security about the details there, because sometimes it'll count and sometimes it won't, just depending on the circumstances. But they're the only ones who can really tell you for sure if it's going to count as a resource. And here are some examples of things Social Security is not going to count as against the resource limit. So of course, the home you live in, the car you drive, they're not going to count grants for school. They will not count like personal effects. So sometimes people will say, oh, I have a gaming system. Is that going to be, that should not be counted as a resource. Certain circumstances of like, a burial plot up to $1,500 value, life insurance up to $1,500 value, but anything over they will count. Money in an ABLE account, which we will talk about today. There's also the special needs trust that they will disregard money in, specifically that special needs trust, that version of the trust, or, a wedding or engagement ring. They're not going to count that, of course. So let's talk about the ABLE account. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the ABLE account option for saving, but it opened up in the state of Washington in 2018, I believe. So it's very new. And currently, there is a requirement for a person to have experienced their disability under the age of 26, but thankfully, starting next year in 2026, they're increasing the age limit to age 46. So I just recently met with someone who experienced their disability after, slightly after the age of 26. And so they're going to wait until the beginning of the year to open an ABLE account, but they will be eligible at that time. But for any of you who did experience a disability before they were 26 or have children who experience a disability before age 26, you can open it up anytime you like. And a few things to be aware of about the ABLE account is that it's a specialized account to help people save money, and if they choose, to invest money without messing up that SSI and Medicaid resource limit, the $2,000 resource limit. And there are some limitations, but thankfully they're not super low limitations like that $2,000 resource limit. They're pretty generous. So you can put up to $19,000 per year in 2025 in general contributions into the ABLE account. So that would be like, an example would be if, let's say your grandma was wanting to give you a cash birthday present, right? And she said, oh, here's a happy birthday, here's $100 cash. Technically for the SSI benefit, because I mentioned it's a needs-based program, if your grandma gives you that $100, even as a birthday present, you're technically supposed to report that to Social Security as unearned income, and it goes towards reducing your SSI benefit, which we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like later. But that's technically the rule, unless you have an ABLE account and your grandma can say, oh, hey, happy birthday, I'm going to go deposit $100 into your ABLE account. Then you have a way to get around that issue, and it won't count against the SSI program. And theoretically, your grandma could do that up to $19,000 in the year. That'd be nice, right? But truly, it's a very helpful way to get around any of those issues of like cash gifts, or even if you wanted to just like throw a little money away for your adult child for later, just because you could absolutely put that in an ABLE account up to that $19,000 amount. Now, on top of that, there is a category for wages, a wage contribution, and that's an additional $15,060 annually, and that's the 2025 amount. So you can put up to that amount of wages into your account. Now, if you want to put more wages than that, you can absolutely, once you hit that threshold, the 15,000 amount, you can start putting, adding wages to your ABLE account under the 19,000 general contribution tab or like note. But you couldn't, once you hit the general contribution limit, you couldn't then put regular money under the wage tab. Those are only for wages. So there is a limit to how much you can have in the ABLE account overall before Social Security starts counting it against the resource limit. So as long as you have less than $100,000 in the ABLE account, it's not going to count towards that $2,000 resource limit. So I suppose technically you could have up to $102,000 in the account before Social Security gets fussy, but that limit's quite high. So thankfully there's some room for growth there. So what can you use the ABLE account money for? That is the question, right? Thankfully, a shorter list of things would be to list what you can't use it for, because there are so many options for you to use your ABLE account money. So a short list of what you can't use it for would be, obviously illegal activities, right? But also things like they don't want you like taking cash out and going to the casino, or taking cash out and going to the liquor store, that kind of stuff. They're like, yeah, don't use ABLE money for that. And then, of course, they want you to use the ABLE money specifically for the beneficiary. So whoever the ABLE account is for, they use the money for their purposes. And what that looks like is You can use it for education purposes or housing or transportation or, just a variety of different things, assistive technology. But a few things that I like to point out that are allowed to be used with ABLE funds would be like if you wanted to go out to dinner with friends. So you could go out to dinner with your friends and pay for your dinner, but you couldn't buy your friend's dinner. And it's kind of a tricky situation. I think they were working on changing that. I haven't heard if they fully changed that requirement, but just, err on the side of caution for now. So what that means is ABLE, so ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And so really most things, as long as you can make a case for using the ABLE money and how it helps you achieve a better life experience, you can justify using those funds for that reason. Outside that short list that I mentioned, those kind of things are a definite no. But that's what I mean when I say like you can easily show that going out to dinner with your friends and having some social time and connecting, that helps you achieve a better life experience. So purchasing a dinner out with friends or purchasing a coffee before work, all that kind of stuff, that helps you achieve a better life experience. But in the same way, buying your friends dinner, that helps them achieve a better life experience. So can't do that. Oh, there is also, I wanted to mention, an option. So people sometimes ask, how can I access the ABLE money once it's in there? You can always access it by transferring from the ABLE account to a regular bank account, because when you set it up, they want you to have a regular bank account attached to the ABLE for easy transfer of money. So you can easily just transfer from the ABLE to a regular bank account. Excuse me. And you just want to keep records of what you're using that money on in case it ever gets audited. But there's also the option of having a prepaid debit card. So you could, and I believe the way they explained it to me, it works like this. So let's say you have like $10,000 in your ABLE account and you are planning to buy some new clothes for work and you need a pair of shoes. And then you're also like, oh, it's my first week of work. I'm going to buy myself lunch every day just to get me ready for all this extra work I'm going to do. So this week, I'm probably going to spend like $300 on clothes and shoes and maybe buying myself lunch. You would put $300 onto your prepaid debit card that's attached to your ABLE account, and then you would use that amount. But if you tried to use more than what was on the card, it blocks you. It doesn't let you just keep spending, which is nice for sure, because that means if you accidentally try to spend too much, it'll prevent you from making that mistake. But it'll also prevent if someone found your card, like you lost it or they took it or something and they knew how to use it, they couldn't just drain your account. They could only use what was on the card. So that's helpful for sure. Oh, and there's also investment options. I know I mentioned that before, but I just wanted to make sure you knew you can use an ABLE account as like a savings account, but there's also investment options available. So that's something that I would recommend contacting the folks who manage the ABLE account to learn more about, but fantastic option there. And I also wanted to make sure you knew it's not a free service. It does cost $35 per year. So I believe they take out like $8.75, between $8 and $9, right around in there, every 3 months, because it's like a quarterly fee that they collect, but it's $35 per year. So I always tell folks, if you only ever want to save like maybe a couple $100, maybe up to $1,000, you don't have to open an ABLE account. But if you want like, $2, $3, $4, $10,000 as like a nest egg to save up and have that assurance there, $35 a year, small price to pay to have that amount saved up. All right, so let's circle back to SSI specifically, and the fact that it is a needs-based program. And so what that means, of course, eligibility is based on disability, but it's also based on what Social Security thinks is your need, your financial need for the benefit. And so when you have other income in the month, they do reduce your SSI benefit. Thankfully, when we're talking about wages or earned income, they're not going to count all of your wages. So as your other income increases, your SSI will decrease, but it's only going to decrease by a little less than $1 for every $2 that you're earning at work. And that's specifically the gross amount of wages. That's the before taxes amount. And so that's an important distinction to realize, that it's not the money that goes into your account. It's going to be the money you earn before any kind of like taxes or bills are taken out. And in our benefits planning meetings, so if you are a customer of DVR and you're having a benefits planning meeting with one of us benefits planners, sometimes we'll estimate what you plan to earn at work by using this equation here that Social Security recommended we use. So what we'll do is we will find your estimated gross monthly wages by taking the hourly wage that you plan to earn and multiplying it by the hours you're going to work per week, and then multiplying it by 4.33 weeks. And the reason we use 4.33 instead of just 4 weeks is because there's always a few scraggly days on the end, right? I think February might be the only month that has exactly 4 weeks. Every other month has a little extra. So that's how we find your estimated wages. But of course, if you're meeting with us and you already have wages and you're like, I've got actual numbers for my wages each month, we'll plug that in, of course. But I wanted to talk to you about the way Social Security decides how much to count of your wages. So they count a little less than $1 for every $2 you earn, but practically that looks like this. So they have some rules called income exclusions that they apply to your wages before they count anything. They have a $20 general income exclusion, so they'll ignore $20 right off the top. They have a $65 earned income exclusion, and so they'll ignore $65 right off the top. And then whatever's left over, the third income exclusion says, we'll just cut it in half. So that's where that a little less than $1 for every $2 earned comes from. That's their most basic, straightforward equation that they use. They have other rules that they can apply to ignore more income, more wages, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But real quick, let's look at this example of work with the numbers plugged in, okay? So this fella is working 20 hours a week, and he's earning the Washington state minimum wage, which is $16.66 per hour right now. And so that's where this first line is showing 20 hours a week times $16.66 per hour times 4.33 weeks. And that means he's going to earn about $1,442 of gross wages each month. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat this evening. I apologize. So next step, to figure out how much of his wages are going to be counted against his SSI, what we're going to do, we're going to apply those income exclusions. So we'll take 1442 of wages minus 20 minus 65, divide by 2. So what that leaves us with is $679. So even though he's earning 1442, Social Security is only going to count 679. And so that's the amount that's going to come out of the SSI benefit. So if John, this fella, is receiving the full federal benefit rate, the $967 of SSI, they're going to take out $679, and that leaves him with a reduced SSI benefit of $288. And that's significantly lower, but if that's happening, it's because he has all those wages he worked for all month. And so what's going to end up happening for John is that even with that reduced SSI amount, he's actually going to have more money in the month when he's working and he has some SSI than when he only has his SSI. So his new gross budget for the month went up to $1,730. Definitely better than just the $967. So a second ago, I mentioned that Social Security has some extra rules that allow them to ignore even more of someone's wages. And this rule is amazing because it is, well, specifically for students who are full-time students. So it's not that they have to attend 7:30 to 3:30 every day or something like that. They just have to be considered a full-time student at their school, and they have to be under the age of 22. And of course, they have to be working while they're considered a full-time student. Those are the criteria to get to apply for this specific rule. It's called a student earned income exclusion. And for folks who meet that criteria, who are in that category, they can ask Social Security to apply this rule to their wages, and Social Security will ignore up to $2,350 of wages every month until it reaches the annual limit that they have. They can only ignore so much every year. But that limit's pretty high. It's $9,460. And that's in a calendar year. So that's January through December. So if someone starts working in the summer, then, let's say they start working in June, right after school lets out. So if they ask for the student earned income exclusion to be applied to their wages, they're going to have June through December to try and work as much as they can. And, they might hit the 9,000 limit, but they might not. And if they don't, then all those wages are going to be ignored by Social Security. So let's look at what that would play out like. So here's our example. We have an example of someone who is under age 22, still considered a full-time student, and they're working, earning $1,500 of gross wages each month. Because that $1,500 amount is below the monthly amount that Social Security allows to ignore, it's below the $2,350 amount that they'll ignore. That means that Social Security will see the wages when they report them, and they'll see the note, oh, they have the student earned income exclusion on file, and so they will ignore all of those wages. They'll ignore all $1,500 of this person's wages because of that student earned income exclusion. And that means that this person not only gets all their wages, but they're going to get the full SSI amount, the full $967 of SSI. So this person, while they're able to use the student earned income exclusion, their monthly budget is going to be $2,467. It shows down there at the bottom. That's their $1,500 wages plus their $967 SSI. Altogether, very nice. And that is a wonderful opportunity to throw some of that extra money from wages into an ABLE account and save it for later, especially if they keep working past the age of 22, past graduation. Eventually, Social Security is going to be counting some of those wages. So that would be, a great time to be able to dip into that ABLE account and cover some extra things. There we go. So finishing up our example, like I mentioned, it's in the calendar year. So for this person, because they're working, I would say probably like 21 to 22 hours a week at minimum wage, let's say, because it's $1,500. This person's earning $1,500 a month. They're going to have their January through June wages completely, like 100% ignored by Social Security. They will apply the student earned income exclusion for January through June. And so for all those months, they'll get their full SSI. But after June, this person will only have $460 remaining of that annual limit for the student earned income exclusion. So starting in July, just for the month of July, Social Security would apply, the ignoring of $460, the remaining amount for the student earned income exclusion. And then they would count the remaining amount of their wages. So if this person has $1,500 in July of wages, $460 of it will be ignored. And the amount Social Security will count would only be $1,040. That's the amount that Social Security will plug into that earlier equation we talked about, where they ignore 20 and then they ignore 65 and then cut it in half. So very, very useful. If you're a student under age 22 and you're working, you're full-time student status, absolutely need to get this on file with Social Security. Okay, so let's talk about Medicaid with SSI. Like I mentioned, you automatically in the state of Washington are eligible for Medicaid. It just starts for you when you become eligible for the SSI program. And this is a federal and state funded health insurance program for people with low income and limited resources. That's again where that, $2,000 resource limit issue comes in. And it has, it's changed quite a bit in the last few years because of the public health emergency. But it does, provide mental health care, and it covers prescriptions, medical equipment, and it provides a way for paying for long-term and in-home care services. So those are all things that are still with Medicaid. Medicaid helps cover those services. An example would be if you are connected with DDA and you have Medicaid, then you'll get DDA services. So that is definitely an important distinction to remember. But I also wanted to mention that, so there's like 55 different kinds of Medicaid in the state of Washington. There might be a few more now, actually, because like I said, there's been some changes going on. But there is a specific version of Medicaid that's connected to SSI, and it's called 1619B. And that's a funny name, but it's a wonderful version of Medicaid because for people who, excuse me, for people who are on the SSI program and they're working, sometimes when they're working, they earn enough money that it makes their SSI cash benefit reduced to zero. And thankfully, with 1619B in the state of Washington, that rule says, hey, if you're on SSI and your wages go to zero, you actually get to stay on the SSI program and keep your Medicaid because of this 1619B rule. And the limit for that is called the state threshold. Excuse me. So you would get to stay on, 1619B Medicaid or in 1619B status as long as your annual gross wages are below that state threshold. And in Washington, that state threshold is really high. So it is $60,181 of gross wages in the year. That is a good chunk of money. So if someone is, just to give you a point of reference, if someone is working full-time at the minimum wage of $16.66 per hour, that I think is somewhere in the ballpark of like 30 to 35,000, I think, of gross wages. So there is a lot of wiggle room to really test out what you can do sustainably when you're on the SSI program and you want to work without worrying about losing your Medicaid, without worrying about losing your SSI eligibility. I've met with folks who are working over the break-even point, that amount of money that would make your SSI go to zero for a few months, but then something happens and they're like, yeah, I can't sustain that. So they bring their hours down. And as long as, they were communicating consistently with Social Security, so Social Security knew to just bring the SSI back up. It's really, really helpful to know that that safety net is going to stay with you while you're testing out what you can do sustainably with work. Of course, the other piece for keeping that 1619B Medicaid status is the resource limit. So you want to make sure that you're not accidentally going over the $2,000 resource limit. Again, I know I said it before, but it bears repeating. That ABLE account is fantastic for that purpose. All right. A few final thoughts about the SSI program. For circumstances where a person is under age 18, so they're a child, if they get SSI eligible, if they become eligible for the program, parental income is going to be considered for eligibility. For people over age 18, only their income and resources are counted, but for children under age 18, parents' income and resources are going to be considered. It's called parental deeming. And in that same vein, there's another kind of deeming that's called spousal deeming. And that's when someone who has SSI has married someone who does not have SSI benefits, so they can't be an SSI couple, but the other spouse who's not on SSI has their own income. Some of that income is deemed to the adult on SSI. So that's something you want to keep in mind as well. Spouse's income can affect SSI amount and eligibility. Also, when someone is eligible for SSI, if they are not paying what Social Security considers to be their fair share of rent, then Social Security will say, oh, you're getting a discount on your rent, or oh, you're not required to pay your full fair share of rent. I guess you don't need as much SSI money. That is a rule they have called in-kind support and maintenance, and they will reduce a person's SSI by up to 1/3. So instead of getting the full $967, they could only get $644 a month. So that's something to consider there. The exact amount of what Social Security considers to be their fair share of rent just changed this past fall. I believe it's at least $323 a month, but I always recommend going a little above that if that makes sense with your budget, with what's appropriate to be charging for rent with the circumstances. But again, it just depends on what's best for your family, your household, your rent or mortgage amount. So you always want to make sure you have a clear explanation of why you're charging what you're charging. Also, Social Security is going to be about 2 months delayed with making any changes to the SSI benefit. That's something that's really important to remember, because if you start working, the first 2 months you're working, you're probably going to get your full SSI benefit. And when that happens, sometimes Social Security, depending on the circumstances, they'll say, oh, we're not going to call it an overpayment. We'll just keep being 2 months delayed with the changes. But sometimes they say, you know what, that is an overpayment and we want that money back. So that's something you want to be aware of as well. All righty, let's talk about wage reporting and communication with Social Security. When you are working, or if you stop working, you want to make sure that you contact the local Social Security office first. They used to be a lot easier to get in touch with, but lately there's been some, without going too far into it, there's been some issues with getting a hold of the local office. So if you can't get a hold of the local office, you want to be prepared to call the national number, but their wait time is anywhere between like 1 to 4 hours. So you will get through to someone, but you'll be on hold for hours. So you just want to be aware of that. It is so important for a big change like start of work or stop of work to talk to someone directly at Social Security. Don't just start sending pay stubs. Don't send them a letter. all of that will be ignored, or it'll be misfiled, or it's going to cause confusion. They need to hear directly from you or your representative payee if you have someone who's on file who officially helps you manage your finances. They want to hear from them. But it's going to be really important to get in the habit of consistently reporting your wages to Social Security. And technically they give you until the 10th of the month. So like if you had wages this month in April, you would have until May 10th to report them. But it gets so busy. There's sometimes like hundreds and even thousands of people reporting to a specific Social Security office on the 10th. So we always recommend shooting for a better target date of the 6th. But you really want to make sure any pay stubs, any paychecks that you receive in the month, you report in the following month by the 6th. There's lots of different ways that you can report your wages. We talk about all of this in our benefits planning meeting. So everything we've talked about so far today, we go over thoroughly. This is scratching the surface today. We go over it very thoroughly in our benefits planning meeting when you're a DVR customer. So anywho, the ways that you can report your wages for SSI, they have a designated SSI phone number. You can mail copies of your pay stubs. You can drop copies in the Dropbox at the local office. They don't really do in-person, like at the counter meetings without an appointment anymore. But there's also, sometimes you can fax. That's also an option sometimes. They have an app for your phone. But I always recommend, if you can, create a My Social Security account on their website. And that's the best option because all the other options I mentioned, you're kind of at Social Security's mercy if they get around to like sending you a letter saying, oh, hey, we entered your information and, you know, everything's logged in and here's your proof. But with the My Social Security account, it gives you immediate proof. So if you have the account, all you have to do is let Social Security know that you're going to use the account when you report start of work. And what they'll need from you is something called the employer identification number, or the EIN. And you can give that to them and say, hey, I'm going to report wages on the My Social Security account. And they'll connect it. Might take a few weeks, but you can check every few days to, you know, once a week to see if it's connected. And all you have to do once they connect it is go to the reporting section, type in your gross amount of wages. When you click submit, it gives you a receipt. It's like a confirmation page, and you have proof of what you've reported when. And it'll save on your account, but you can also print or download a copy yourself. Or like if you're on your phone doing it, you might be able to open it and do a little screenshot and save it. And then you have proof of what you've reported. And that is so helpful down the road if Social Security does a work review and they're like, hey, we want to see all this information. And we think maybe you forgot to tell us about some stuff. You can show them all of your receipts. Definitely, no matter how you report though, get some kind of confirmation. So if you choose one of the other options, make sure you get that letter from them. Make sure that they are sending you a confirmation letter in the mail telling you, hey, we logged your stuff in. And I also recommend keeping all copies of your pay stubs, whether it's like paper copies, keep paper copies of your pay stubs, or if you're like a digital copy person, you can have a digital copy saved. But a lot of times I run into situations where someone says, oh yeah, I get paid and I have access to look at my pay stubs on this pay stub portal, or it's like an app I downloaded. And that's great, except if you decide to stop working at that job, eventually you won't have access to see those pay stubs anymore. So you want to make sure you download those copies or you print them off and save them. And I mean like forever. I know that sounds daunting, but it's very important to always have a record of what you've earned while you're on Social Security benefits, especially. And I always say, why don't you just, if you're going to do the My Social Security account, save a copy of that receipt you get with a copy of the pay stubs that you reported that month. So you're super extra organized. And it may seem obnoxious to have to do that every month, but it's better than later on having to chase down all of these pay stubs and all of this information if Social Security decides to do a big work review, which they don't do all the time, but they do it enough that I warn everyone. So we've talked about a lot of information today. And again, like I said, we're just scratching the surface, but that's also why we have benefits planners. So benefits planning is a service that we provide at DVR, and we can help and meet with people who are eligible for DVR services and who receive Social Security benefits or even just state benefits. We can have a conversation with folks who maybe they just have like food stamps and TANF and housing like Section 8. We can have a conversation about that and talk about what to expect with their benefits there, their options. And we can also meet with students. So students who are engaged in our pre-employment transition services. So if you are participating in pre-ETS or the pre-employment transition services with your teacher, and the regional transition consultant is probably someone that you've met, then we can have a conversation about your benefits. It may not be as thorough and extensive as if you were like a full DVR customer directly, working with a DVR counselor on, but we can still have a discussion about what to expect with your benefits. All right, so I have talked a lot tonight, and I don't think anyone has had any questions so far, but I'd love to just check in, ask if you guys have any questions for me right now.
I have a couple questions. This is Beth, the teacher in the Wenatchee Valley Community Transitions. You spoke about the ABLE savings account, and I have several.
Yes.
I have several student workers who do not have guardians or conservators, if that's the right way to say that. Can they open an ABLE savings account on their own? And that would
Yeah.
be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes folks will have a guardian who helps them manage it, or they'll have a representative payee if they're on Social Security benefits. But if they are, have been approved to handle their own finances, and they're just, doing it on their own, absolutely they can open an ABLE account, just, in their own right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then another question about the student earned income exemption. If a student.
Oh yeah, the student earned income exclusion. Yeah.
Sorry. When students.
No, okay.
If they're working over the summer months and not attending school, but are enrolled in the fall and spring, is that still considered?
Oh, fantastic question. Yes. So for students who are working over the summer, as long as they're still enrolled for the fall semester as a full-time student, those wages during the summer, student earned income exclusion can be applied to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And then, sorry, I have lots of questions.
No, that's okay. That's what this time's for.
I have assisted families at our Social Security office, and the couple of times I've gone, the workers there were not aware of the student earned income exclusion. And how do
Sounds
we?
about right.
Okay, so that's not new. Okay, so is it something they can just go online? It would be easier to just, no, they have to talk to somebody.
Yeah. So I would recommend if you're at the office, the Social Security office, and you're saying, hey, this person has SSI benefits, and we would like to request the student earned income exclusion be applied to their wages, and the person's like, I don't know what that is, or that's not a thing, or something like that. I would recommend asking, can I speak to someone in your SSI department? Or can we speak to their designated SSI claims representative? And if they're like, oh, we don't have anyone like that available right now, I would say, can I please speak to your supervisor? Because the supervisor better know. If they are a supervisor and they have never heard of, or they're not familiar with the student earned income exclusion, that is obtuse. So yeah, I would say start with the SSI claims rep, request that person, or request an expert or a specialist from the SSI department.
Okay.
Or then if neither of those are available, request a supervisor, because that is a really important piece, that if the person is new or they just were never trained on it, that's okay, but they need to get someone who knows their stuff.
Thank you. And finally,
Yeah.
I was working with a student who receives SSI benefits and has a parent and sibling who also have received benefits, food assistance perhaps, if I don't know if that's the right way to say it. And the student wanted to apply for food benefits for herself. And
Mhm.
on that application, it was required, even though she's over 18, they required parental income and other household income. What is the best way for a person over 18 to apply on their own for those benefits?
Yeah. So from my understanding, if someone is applying for food benefits, specifically like wash cap food benefits, that's connected to the SSI benefit, you have to, I believe the criteria is, of course, over age 18, but then you have to be considered like your own household of one, and you have to like purchase and prepare food separately. And I think food stamps has different rules where like if you and your roommate or you and your other family member who you live with, you are each technically eligible for food stamps. They might do like a combined food benefit for the household, but for wash cap specifically, you have to like purchase, prepare, all of that, stay totally separate to get wash cap food benefits. For food stamps, you can make that distinction and say, hey, I may live with my parents, but I am over 18. I purchase and prepare my own food. We are not sharing food. So they may get a separate benefit that way. But so DSHS, the folks who run the food stamps, they play it kind of close to the vest. So I haven't gotten like a thorough explanation of like how they decide everything. But again, like if you can make a case for like, hey, we're separate for food stamps, they might do separate benefits, but I think usually they like to have one benefit combined. Even if it's like a roommate situation, I've heard that they do that if they're purchasing and preparing and sharing. But yeah, that's kind of the distinction there. I would just say if you want your own benefit separate from everyone else, you probably have to be very clear that you purchase and prepare food separately. You're not sharing food. You're not doing family style.
Thank you. And is it best to do that in the office then?
You know, and again, I don't have their application memorized. I'm not sure if there's an extra space for like remarks or if there's an extra question about like, do you purchase and prepare together or separate from the others in the household? There should be questions like that, but if they're not super clear, then maybe going in the office and letting them know like, hey, this is the distinction here. How can I get that point across in the application? Because I didn't see where it was expressed for me to share that. They might have some information for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Hope.
Yeah. Any other questions?
It looks like we're all good here. So Hope, thank you so much.
Okay.
I always learn so much from your presentations. We appreciate you so much doing this, and we'll keep you posted for our next benefits planning event.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Always happy to help.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye. Have a great evening. Well, let's see if I can stop sharing. There we go. Bye-bye.